Olas Media. Olas Media presents Cannabis Enlightened. Now here's your host, Dr. Leroy Brady.
Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Cannabis Enlightened. I am your host, Dr. Leroy. And our program, as always, is brought to you by March and Ash. You know, this week I had the opportunity to sit on a couple of panel discussions with the community in which we discussed cannabis, not from the standpoint of what should you smoke, but just questions, general questions about cannabis. And I was very pleased to be in the presence of some, wonderful people of our community talking about cannabis, talking about the lotions, the salves, the edibles, the drinkables. And, it's that kind of thing that I think helps people to understand more about what cannabis is. In California, we have had, the sale and consumption of cannabis for quite a while, but in other parts of the country, let's say New York, it's just happening. And today we have as our guest a man who has done a lot of work in that area. He is the editor and publisher of New York Cannabis Insider. Coming up after this break, Brad Racino will talk about what he does as editor and publisher.
You're listening to the Cannabis Enlightened podcast powered by March and Ash. Welcome back to the Cannabis Enlightened podcast. I'm Chris Canturi, and here's more from our host, Dr. Leroy Brady.
I wanted to share with everybody that over the last couple of weeks, I've been on a couple of different panels and talking about cannabis and what cannabis is and what it is not. And I got to tell you that people are really interested in cannabis, not necessarily taking it or smoking it or drinking it, but they're starving for information about cannabis. And I love to go out on the panel discussions and talk about cannabis and try to answer some questions. Some I can answer and some I cannot. And on that note, I've got someone here who his business is information, print information, probably verbal information, but he is the editor and publisher of New York Cannabis Insider. That's right. I said New York, not San Diego, New York Cannabis Insider. Brad Racino is our guest today, and I am extremely interested in what he has to say. He's a dynamic personality. And I'm just so pleased to be able to have him as our guest today. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you very, very much for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Great, great. So, Brad, as we start off, let's do an introduction. Who is Brad and what makes him so significant, other than he's an editor and publisher of a well-known, dynamic news piece? Tell us about Brad.
Sure. I'm a native New Yorker. Grew up here up until I was in my late 20s. After college, bounced around and had a lot of very strange jobs, which eventually actually helped me become a better reporter. But right out of college, I started selling vacuums, and then I opened up a fine art gallery, and then I moved to the Bahamas, and I was an underwater shark videographer. Then I came back, I worked at a TV station, did a bunch of other stuff in between, but I was a photographer at heart, actually, for many, many years, and got into TV as a videographer and an editor. And while I was in TV, I got to work with a lot of reporters and see their process and see the access that they could get, but also see some of the impact that they could have on communities and on lives. And I really liked that. It really spoke to me. And I ended up going to grad school in my late 20s, thinking I was going to study photojournalism. Mm-hmm. But when I got there, within a couple of weeks, I got talked into investigative reporting, and I absolutely just fell in love with it from the start. I was very, very lucky to have some mentors in school who kind of took me under their wing, showed me a lot of tips and tricks, and allowed me to kind of do my own thing. And I just fell in love with it. And after that, I had been to San Diego maybe I was like 20 or 21. And I remember telling myself, I was walking in Ocean Beach at the time, and I said, I have got to find a way to live here. And, and so part of my master's degree was finding an internship. And so my first thought was, there's got to be, please let there be one in San Diego. And so I reached out, and luckily enough, I was accepted as an intern at a very small nonprofit called at the time it was called Investigative News Source. And it was me, the executive director, and at the time, and I think maybe one or two other reporters. And they kind of, again, let me do my own thing, spread my wings. My editor at the time said, let's just throw spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks. Let's try new things, be innovative. And over the next 9 or 10 years, I kind of grew to be the senior investigative reporter there, the assistant director, assistant editor. And we went from a staff of about 3 to, when I left last year, I think we were 17 or 18 strong. And it was really unique in that all of us were responsible for not only doing reporting for the web, but also for doing radio and TV. Our primary partner there in San Diego is KPBS. So they are the NPR and PBS affiliate. So everything we did was across web, radio, and TV. And so I got to look into everything from transportation to the seaport development on the North Embarcadero to, lawyers that were doing some shady things, to local government, everything. But the only thing I didn't do was cannabis. I never even thought about kind of looking into it or reporting on it. It was so ubiquitous, like at the time, that I just took it for granted. It was just something that was around. Right. And then after that, I ended up, my wife and I had our son in 2019. And then we had another one on the way, he's now 9 months old. But at the time, we were in our little home in City Heights, and our families are both in New York, 3,000 miles away, giving us the guilt trip every single time they called. And we just really missed them. We needed some support. And my wife had a really unique opportunity out here. And so we said, I think after 10 years, it's time to move back. So we did. And when I was out here, I was looking around for something that was similar. I'm in central New York now, which people think of New York as New York City. There's a lot more once you go up north. It's a big, big state. So I was looking around for something similar, and there really wasn't anything similar to what I had done in San Diego. And I ended up just asking some local news people to meet me for drinks. I just wanted to talk journalism. I missed it. I missed the environment. And just chance had it that one of those people told me, hey, we have this job opening at Syracuse.com for this entirely new thing called New York Cannabis Insider. And again, we want someone to start it up and just do your own thing, make it work. We will allow you that latitude to take those chances and do those things. So it sounded really intriguing, and I took the job. And I made it very clear at the onset that, listen, I don't know much about like how the politics of cannabis works, all this. And they said, that's fine, just learn. And so I did very quickly. And I got hired last September. We hired our first full-time reporter in December. And then I went out on paternity leave. So kind of threw a wrench in the mix right when we were getting started for about 2 months, but came back and we started publishing in March. And it has been nonstop ever since. It's me, my full-time reporter. We have a summer intern that we got through the Dow Jones News Fund that we're thankful for them for supplying, and then kind of the marketing team on the newspaper side. But really, it's just our little tiny team, and we are trudging along and trying to deliver the news that matters, that no one else is looking into, and hold some people accountable for some promises that are being made right now. Trying really hard to look out for the little guys and give a voice to the underserved, and keep on trucking. And so far, so good.
First of all, how many vacuums did you sell?
A lot. I was really good. Very good.
So when you
I can still do my sales spiel from when I sold them. I'm not going to do it, but I can still tell you everything about that vacuum.
Well, I'm glad you didn't stick there. I'm glad that you were able to move on and pursue your dreams. You said you did some investigative reporting here in San Diego, correct?
Correct.
What was one of the more interesting, investigative pieces that you did when you were here?
I think most of them I find interesting because that's why I did them. They struck something about me, but I really, really loved a series that I'd worked on over many years that I would dip my toe back into once in a while on on the waterfront, on San Diego's waterfront, and the public land, and the North Embarcadero. I still remember this. Like, I think it was 20 something years ago.
Wow.
There was a plan to keep that land public, to make it for the people, have parks and walkways and all this stuff. And bit by bit over the years, all that public land kept getting taken away from the people behind the scenes, until when it was finally built, the Broadway Pier was this massive thing. All of these things had been usurped by very powerful interests, and I spent months and months looking into who those people were and why, and kind of dissecting what went wrong, because as they are redeveloping the waterfront now with the Seaport multi-billion-dollar thing, I wanted to set a precedent and make sure that does not happen again, and to make sure that people are aware of what can happen, how it happens, and to make their voice known and be involved and civically engaged to demand what's rightfully theirs, which is that waterfront is for the people.
And as a result of your investigative reporting, did you move the mountain?
You never know. I mean, it was already something that was done after I even got into San Diego. And with those kind of things, anecdotally, yeah, I hear, of course, like, you did great work and now we're keeping an eye on this stuff. But most of the time, you never know, unless it's something very specific about some particular bad actor who did something and then they end up going to jail. Most of the bigger picture stuff is it's hard to kind of quantify what we as a reporter do other than provide the information. But once in a while you get those that you made a direct impact. So it's hard to say.
Well, okay. Well, great. You are a native New Yorker, correct?
Correct.
But you like San Diego.
I love San Diego. It is my favorite place in America. I've been on so many road trips since I was like 16 years old around this country. I've been to probably 40 states, and San Diego is by far my favorite spot in this country.
Well, whenever you want to come back, our arms are wide open for you. Okay?
Thank you. I'm just going to make sure that my parents who are here babysitting my kids right now don't hear that out loud.
Well, you're one of the few people that I know that are from New York that want to come to California. Most of the people want to either go back or they want to stay in New York because they love it. They say New York is the center of the universe.
Yeah, it's just two totally different mindsets, and I think I like both of them. New York is fast-paced, it's aggressive, it's in your face kind of thing, and San Diego is the complete opposite. But I love both of those things. Sometimes I want to be that aggressive in your face person. Sometimes I just want to clock out, eat a burrito, go to Pacific Beach, just do nothing and relax. The best burrito I've ever had in San Diego, I still, to this day, I will die on this hill, is Trujillo's Lambda Burrito up by the college. And I make it a point to go there every single time I'm back.
Okay. And I want the audience to know that is an unsolicited. I didn't create that. I didn't make that happen.
I'm getting free nachos for life every time I go there.
For the rest of your life. Exactly. Yep. Let's talk a little bit about you getting to New York and getting into the cannabis space. So this must have been new for you to be an editor and a publisher. So you got everything. You're in charge. The buck stops with you.
Yeah. And it's actually even more than that, because doing editor, publisher, and then I'm also a reporter. I mean, because we're so small staffed, and also I can't let go of that instinct. So I'm constantly publishing as well. But then we have all that. But on the other half of our business model is conferences. So we are putting on statewide educational conferences. We just had one in Albany that was unbelievably successful for us, at least as far as the feedback and everything. And we now, because it was so successful, we decided to put on 3 more before the end of this year, which is turning a little bit more of my hair gray, but it's still super exciting. And we have one in New York City coming up in a few weeks, then one in the Syracuse area in September, and another in the Hudson Valley in November. Cannabis Insider is actually it's kind of hard to describe. I'll try and make it simple. Basically, the parent company that owns us, or owns Syracuse.com and NewYorkUpstate.com, which is where we publish, that parent company is called Advanced Media. They also own a number of news outlets around the Northeast and some in the South. They own NJ.com, NewJersey.com. And about 4 years ago, when New Jersey was legalizing and getting around to recreational, they started a New Jersey Cannabis Insider. So that has been up and running for, I believe, around 4 years now. But they saw the success of that business model of the journalism combined with the conferences and really just leading the space with trusted, valuable news. And they said, why don't we do this in New York? So when I started, we had a little bit of that same template if we wanted to follow what Jersey was doing. I asked if it was okay if we did it slightly differently, and concentrated a lot more on the straight news, like that you would read in a newspaper, as opposed to 100% kind of B2B industry knowledge, like tips from experts and cannabis veterans and such. So ours is a little bit more of a mix of the news and the B2B. Theirs is a lot stronger focus B2B. But either way, both our entities are doing really well in our states. People have such a thirst for this knowledge, whether they are the entrepreneurs getting into the space, or like you had just mentioned on the intro, the general public who there's such a stigma around this. And the more education you provide, the more they come around and, realize that this is a legitimate thing, and also a multi-billion-dollar industry. Like it can change states, it can change economies, it can change lives.
Exactly. So as you're in this space, it sounds like you've got your hands on a number of different things. You're continuing to do some investigative reporting. You've got these conferences going on. You are in charge of the newsprint that you're doing, and you're a reporter.
Yeah.
What part of the day do you sleep?
Like 12:30 to 3:30, like
Right.
last night.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah, because you throw in the infant son and the 3-year-old, and it's not a lot of sleep, but it's a lot of coffee. And supportive family for when I need a break, or my wife's super supportive. She's a journalist as well. She gets it. Her and I are both the same in terms of when we get into something, we get into it and we can't stop. And so that's part of the reason we wanted to move back, was also the family support and having a chance to take a break once in a while.
Oh, I can understand. I understand. So when you left San Diego, the cannabis industry had already matured to the point where we'd approved the cultivation, manufacturing, sale of, and in some parts of San Diego, the consumption on site. In some places, National City, if you remember, National City has something like that. So that's what it was. That's what it was like before you left, correct?
Yes.
So as you traveled 3,000 miles to New York, what did the terrain look like when you got there in terms of the cannabis industry?
Well, I got here, I would say April 2021, that on March 31st, New York had passed the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, which made recreational legal. And so it was brand new that this thing had been passed, and that this industry was forthcoming. But you saw what you would see pretty much anywhere: the CBD shops, those kind of stores everywhere. The closer you get to Manhattan, especially in Manhattan, there might have been some mobile trucks or like sellers kind of operating. Like if you went into a CBD store and asked the right way, they'd sell you something over the counter. Yeah. But then as after it became legal, and the state was in the process of creating the regulatory framework, the regulatory bodies that would come into existence, people kind of started becoming a lot more brazen, and to the point where, especially in New York City, it was just all over the place and in your face. I mean, stores openly advertising that they are selling weed. That right now in New York City, mobile trucks everywhere you go. I went down and got out of Penn Station. It was just blasted in the face with the smell of marijuana for about 10 blocks because everyone's smoking. So it quickly became something that was, accepted slightly underground a little bit, to just come like billboards just all over the place very, very fast. And so that's been a really interesting thing to watch, and also obviously to cover as a reporter.
I want to ask your opinion about this. And you've used the cannabis you use cannabis in two different words, weed and marijuana. Which do you have any preference, or what's your feeling about how we refer to cannabis?
Honestly, I do that because when I'm writing a story, I hate to see a same word over and over and over again. So I'm at the point in my brain where I use cannabis, weed, and marijuana interchangeably, just because I'm thinking as I would write. Like, you don't want to read a sentence or three sentences in a row that have the same word in them, but sometimes you have to include the same thing. So I use them interchangeably because I'm coming at it, I think, from a writer's perspective. But when if I were just to think about that, I mean, I've learned a lot over the last year about the implications of the word marijuana, the stigma attached to it, where it came from. And then, but there's so many people, it's weird. Like, the differences, I will get emails saying, stop saying weed. It's got a stigma. And then I'll get people saying, stop saying cannabis. It sounds like you're an academic. And then stop saying marijuana. It's like, what do you want me to call this thing again? I don't have many options. But like, when I think of weed, especially growing up, like, weed definitely has, to me, a much more of that stink on it as a word. Used it my whole life, like, used that word my whole life. But I think that's, out of the three words, that's the one that people seem to take issue with the most, at least from my experience, from what I'm hearing from readers or when I have conferences. It just, that seems to be the thing that people glom onto.
Weed or the marijuana?
Weed. Yeah. And then the marijuana thing has, I think, as more and more people are becoming educated on that history, I've seen so many stories just over the last year from different publications diving into the history of marijuana. People are starting to react to that. Right. And then you also have the two different, you have marijuana with an H and marijuana with a J. And when New York, and when New York did the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, and basically in every place that there's a written regulation from the government, they use it with an H. And then I'm hearing like, oh, there's different reasons for that. And so I'm still figuring this out, man, but it's confusing.
Right. When I go out, I always say cannabis or the flower. And what I'm trying to do is to let the plant grow up from the weed and marijuana to cannabis. Let it grow up to cannabis, because that's what it actually is. And it seems to be more acceptable to people that would normally kind of say, "No, that's an illegal drug. I don't want anything to do with that." But when I talk to them about cannabis and the fact that there are other ways to consume it and use it other than smoke it, I seem to get a more positive response. And I've noticed when I read marijuana in a newsprint, or if I hear them talk about it on the news, it's not necessarily positive. And I'm thinking, are they saying that to bring more notice to it? Marijuana as opposed to cannabis. So I know there are a lot of people that are legacy users who marijuana is that's all they've known. Cannabis to them, sometimes they say, "What are you talking about?" So it's interesting to hear your take on it.
There's also a different thing that I bet a lot of people don't know, but in the news, especially, mainly with digital publications, if you're reading something online, those three words have very different rankings for search traffic. So if you go to Google Trends, which is a free website you can go to, and type in the word cannabis, type in the word weed, and type in the word marijuana, you'll see the search traffic differences, and they're extreme. So the most searched for word is weed. The second is marijuana, and cannabis is a far third. And so I think a lot of places will opt for either marijuana or weed, just because it's more likely that someone will find that story if they're searching, like, where do I buy medical marijuana? Their story is going to rank much higher if they call it marijuana as opposed to cannabis. And so there's a little bit of a reasoning behind that, at least for us. Like, we've noticed in different headlines generating those words, legal weed versus legal marijuana versus legal cannabis. It yields very different results for how people find our story, where they come from. So it's kind of it's a little insidery, but
sure,
that's why we do it.
I like the way you're looking at it. It's kind of changing my mind a little bit. I try to still get people to say cannabis, but I think the word marijuana is going to be around for quite a while.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Whether it's good or bad, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
There. Now, you've done quite a few stories on cannabis, marijuana, weed. And I've read quite a few of them. What story comes to mind that is the most interesting or provocative to you?
Most interesting. So at the moment over the last few months, I have been really interested in the medical industry here in New York and what is happening to that as the focus shifts to recreational. And so about maybe a month or two ago, I did a story about kind of how the medical industry here is kind of collapsing for patients, at least for like not the businesses that are selling it, but what's happening to patients who have been using this for years as the state shifts its focus and kind of stops paying attention to them. And what you're seeing is these numbers of registered patients go down and down and down, and their access is really bad. I mean, in New York, there's only 10 organizations that are registered and legally allowed to sell medical marijuana. And like I said really earlier, this is a huge, huge state. And I think there are 38 medical dispensaries in this entire state. And this is a state of 18 million people. And so as this medical side kind of worsens, that has very real effects on people's lives who are using this as medicine. And so the quality of the flower that they're getting, the drive times they have to go through, delivery services that are no longer operational, the prices, like all of this, I know as one thing goes up, as the recreational market rises, you're seeing this, but no one's really paying attention to what's happening to these medical patients. So I've been trying to maintain a focus on their stories as well as we're focusing on recreational, but making sure that we don't lose sight of the fact that hundreds of thousands of people in the state use this for medicine. Like they rely on this. And so that's been one of the things that I think has been, I guess you'd call it provocative, because I'm sure it didn't make the regulatory body happy that I was focusing on that. But
well, yeah. Whenever I talk about cannabis, and I say, well, what do you know about cannabis? And they'll say, well, it gets me high. So I know right away they're talking about the high THC, and it sounds like that's what a lot of people are looking for in New York, something with high THC.
Yeah, I think some people are, but there's a lot of people who also, especially on the medical side, who are very specific about what they're looking for very specific reasons. I have glaucoma, I have sciatica, I have knee pain, and they have spent months, years trying to find that perfect balance that works for them. And as I learn more and more about this and about the science behind it, which I am not an expert on yet, I hope to be in 5-10 years time, but it is absolutely fascinating the way that this system works, the endocannabinoid system, and how it affects different people and their metabolism, and just talking to different folks about what does this do for you, why do you use it, and hearing the myriad reasons that people have for using this and swear to it and say, it got me off opioids, it got me off painkillers, it stopped my drinking. I mean, I talked to a lot of veterans about this, because veterans are a focus within the New York cannabis industry right now of trying to award them priority licenses. And the number of vets I've talked to about this and how they swear it saved their lives is just astounding to hear. So you hear it over and over again, and at some point you believe it, that this is a very, very real thing for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you talked a little bit ago about the regulatory part of this, which is coming from the government. So how is that moving with respect to the illegal market?
That is a fascinating question. And so let me think about how to set this up. So the regulatory bodies that were enacted, that came about in October, are the Office of Cannabis Management, which is like the actual agency that writes the regs and sends letters, will license all that. And then their oversight board is called the Cannabis Control Board. Most of the time we just refer to the office as like the Office of Cannabis Management. When they came on board, or when they came around last October, they made it very clear on the outset that they wanted to prioritize folding in legacy to make sure that they weren't kind of seen as just putting their foot down on this market that for decades has dominated. And they wanted to fold them and listen to them, find ways to incorporate them in the legal market, all of that. But as time went on, especially since I think April or May of this year, they started getting a little more heavy-handed, and they made waves back in March. The office did, by saying that they sent out like dozens and dozens of cease and desist letters to these gray market operators. Mm-hmm. The really another interesting thing for me about this is right now there is this gray market. We don't even refer to it as the black market. It's gray because it's not clear if what they're doing right now is illegal. If you straight up sell to somebody, that's illegal. But what all these people are doing is gifting. They're selling you a sticker for $15 or $60, and then you get an eighth as a gift. And the state regulatory body says definitively that is illegal. You can't do that. However, we went out and surveyed a bunch of different DAs around the state, because they're the people who would prosecute this, and said, what's your view on this? Interestingly enough, there was no unanimous view. Some said this is completely legal. We would never prosecute someone for doing this. Others said this is completely illegal. And so we're in this weird zone where I don't feel comfortable calling what they're doing illegal at all, because no one, like the Attorney General in the state of New York, will not come out and just say this is legal or this is illegal. And until someone like that does, I don't feel comfortable, having a brand new regulatory body tell me that what someone's doing is completely legal. But also the way they're going about this, there seems to be a divide within the own office of if what they're doing is right or wrong by clamping down on these operators, because they're turning a lot of them off from the idea of being folded in, of coming into this new environment and going legal. And so it's been a drama. It's been really interesting to watch the approach and the evolution of it. But to their credit, to the government's credit, they have said time and time again that this is a priority for them, and they want to make sure that they incorporate legacy and fold these people in and listen to them and learn from them. And because at the end of the day, these are a bunch of politicians. I mean, they don't have decades of knowledge of weed. So they have to listen to the people who know what they're doing to make this work.
I always tell this story. When I taught for a number of years, I taught a class called The Business of Cannabis, and I had to prep for it. And generally, when a professor preps for a class, you read a number of different books, okay, to get you ready. There were no good books to read to prepare me for The Business of Cannabis. I literally had to go to conferences and talk to people and listen to the experts and vendors and so forth. But very quickly, I learned that the real experts on cannabis are in prison.
Yep.
Because they know the most.
Yep.
Everybody else is kind of like a Johnny-come-lately, unless you're a legacy person who did your time and you're out, or that you were lucky enough that you didn't get caught.
Mm-hmm.
So your legacy people, are they grandfathered in with, are they awarded a license, or is that a thing? The license, do you have to have a license to sell?
Yes. So you have to have a license, and nobody has a license to sell yet. So, but the really progressive approach that New York took on this, and should be commended if it works, is that they are prioritizing what they call them justice involved people. And justice involved doesn't just mean that you were arrested for marijuana. It means that you could have a father who was arrested, a brother, a son, a daughter. Your life was negatively impacted by the war on drugs. And so what they're doing is the very first round of licensing for retail dispensaries, they are reserving for these justice involved applicants. They're going to do 100, I believe 150, maybe 200 of these licenses.
Wow. And
make sure that these are the people that get a head start in the market. They also are raising right now, trying to raise $200 million through public and private financing to have the state identify, secure, renovate, and build out the dispensaries with state money, and then place these people in them so that they don't have to find the stuff. They can go into it. And when these people apply for this license type, they have to rank geographic zones. And through some scoring matrix that we haven't seen yet, they will get placed into these spaces and basically already have that kind of head start. And it'll still be up to them to run the operation and everything. But it's a commendable approach to trying to make sure that social equity is front and center. And then as the rest of the licenses come out, the cultivation, processing, distribution, all of that, the state is focusing on making sure that 50% of every license type is for social equity. Is make sure that they're reflecting kind of the diversity of the state, but also making sure that people who are affected by this have a seat at the table and have an opportunity to get involved. And I don't think there's any other state that has taken this kind of approach, which it's really cool to see.
That's fascinating because even to the name justice involved applicant or justice involved people is a way of saying social equity. I mean, we call it here. I mean, I was listening to your definition. So it's people that were directly or indirectly harmed by the war on drugs.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be an individual who went to jail, or an individual's son or daughter. I guess that's indirectly, or a wife, or fiance, girlfriend, whoever the person lived with, that they're no longer in the home. So that's very interesting. And also the fact that I think you said New York would build the property and get them set up.
Yeah, they're identifying locations that exist right now across the state. Like, I know that they're looking at one in like right downtown in Manhattan in Union Square, and looking at whether they want to buy that building. And so their job is to find these places, secure them, pay for them, retrofit them, or I'm sorry, renovate them, and get them ready. And these are like, I think minimum like 4,500 or 5,000 square foot dispensaries that they're looking to have ready for these people. It's, again, the devil's in the details and how this all plays out. Everything sounds great on paper, but when you see it, like when you see the minute details of how this is playing out and like who's happy about this, who's not, it gets really complicated. And I do not envy the people at the top who are trying to make this happen, but it is, at the end of the day, it is a commendable action to take and to see through. The only problem with this is, though, not only do they have to be justice involved, but they have to have owned a profitable, or have ownership interest in a profitable business that showed profits for 2 years. And so when you start to dig down into that, it's like, you got an arrest on your record. How likely is it that you have a profitable business and ownership? Like, you could be the manager of like a retail store for years and years and years, but you weren't the owner. And so that doesn't even count. And so when you get really into the definitions, it starts to be like, you start asking, who are these people? Like, do they exist? Are there enough of these people to even apply for this? So we'll see. They're going to open up that licensing application period soon, very soon. And then we'll see what they do. But their goal is to have the first dispensary open by the end of the year. That's what they keep saying. But I don't think that's going to happen.
So, Brad, you mentioned earlier that most of the I was going to say weed, most of the cannabis is from California. So I take it there are not many cultivation and manufacturing facilities in New York yet because it's so new?
Right. I mean, there are for medical, but that's so closely tracked that not a lot of that falls off the truck and makes its way to the black market, at least here. And there's a lot of home grow that kind of feeds the market, but especially, I mean, the center of New York is always probably always will be New York City, and not a lot of room to do a lot of growing down there when you're paying $5,000 for 100 square foot apartment. You don't have a lot of room for a greenhouse in there. So
yeah, that's why when you were talking about a 4,500 square foot store, I was thinking about people that I know that live in New York, and that's bigger than their apartment.
Oh yeah, way bigger.
Wow. And then I guess there's a question of Okay, you have this building. It's in a prime location in New York. How do you get the product in there? Does the state help you with the product, or do you have to do that on your own?
There's a lot of unanswered questions about that right now, and we are trying to get answers for people on this. That the Office of Cannabis Management has been, they haven't been as open as they should be recently about, and I think it's because they're figuring this out, and that's fine. I keep telling them, just say that, just say we're working
Yeah.
on it, but instead it's a lot of just not answering things. But I talked to a lot of people who are going for this initial license type just this week. Yesterday, I was talking to two different people downtown, and they have so many questions of, yeah, how do we get this product into our store? Who do we buy it from? I mean, everything has to be bought from New York growers. This is a
Yeah.
self-contained system that they're setting up. But then they say, how do we differentiate our product from that guy's product if we're selling the same thing?
Yeah.
And like, and do we price it differently, or is the state going to mandate that we keep the price the same? There are so many unanswered questions about this that I don't know.
It sounds to me like they might be trying to import some expertise from maybe California or Colorado, some of Washington state, some of the areas that have been involved in this already.
They have been talking. I mean, at least the government body has been, I know, talking to everyone that they possibly can in and out of state to learn. I mean, why wouldn't you do that? Lessons learned.
Mm.
What went wrong in California with, overgrow or too
Right.
much product? Well, all this stuff. What can we learn? But they are being very serious about, this is New Yorkers first, and so we don't want big companies coming in from out of state initially at all to dominate this market. So they want to kind of build it from the little guys on up. I mean, they're not even letting medical transition to recreational for a while. Like, it's built into the regulations that they can't do that because they're already vertically integrated. The medical operators here are completely vertically integrated. That is not allowed under the new recreational laws. You cannot be vertically integrated. You have to get one of these license types. You can either be retail, you can be a cultivator, you can be a processor, but you can't be all of them unless they have one license type called micro business, and that one you're allowed to, but you're
Sure.
not going to be a billionaire off the micro business license the way they're setting it up.
Wow. That's that's really interesting. I think that here in California and what I've been reading that the retail stores that are doing better have some type of vertical integration so that they have a pathway from cultivation, manufacturing, to be able to get their product on a regular basis. If not, then you're at the mercy of where you can get product from. So
Yeah, if one part of that chain fails, then
you're
that
done.
affects you, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, I'm assuming that the tax is very lucrative for New York. That's one of the reasons why they again wanted to do this because it's bringing in millions, and I'm going to use the B word, billions of dollars. So, are they tax? The illegal market isn't taxed.
Right.
I'm guessing,
Right. Right.
but
There's no one to tax them. Yeah.
yeah, but so the tax to the state to the city come from the legal market. And I would imagine that's being, checked real closely to make sure that people pay their taxes.
Yeah, it will be. Again, like, the system isn't even operating yet, but the way they have it set up, New York is taking this approach that they're going to tax by THC content, which,
Ah,
depending who you talk to, that's either a terrible idea
yeah.
or it's a great idea. I'm not an accountant. I'm not even going to opine on that because I have no idea.
Right.
But like, they're going to do it that way, and then the licensing fees and the taxes that come in on retail are going to go back into this fund that will be allocated to different counties and municipalities based on whether they have those operations going there. But also, a part of that fund will go back toward the social equity mandate and be reinvested in communities that were impacted by the war on drugs. And they've set up a cannabis advisory board, like a 18, I think, member board that will help oversee this fund that is made up of all different individuals, not just government people, but health. And I think some radio personality from Hot 97 on New York City is on it, and like labor and all these different people, to make sure that that fund does what it's supposed to do, which is help people who should be helped by this. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with those taxes over time.
Sounds like they're building a big bureaucracy for cannabis. And I hope it works out. You know, what we're going to have to do is check back with you in about a year or so, provided you're still in New York. I don't know.
I'll either be in studio or
Yeah, if you're here, you can come into the studio. You'll have to let us know. But yeah, I want to check back with you in about a year or so to find out what's going on. But it sounds like you're going to be continuing to do some really big things. You mentioned some conferences earlier. What's the latest conference that's coming up?
So we have one on August 23rd in New York City in Midtown. That one's a very small, we're testing out these kind of more informal get-togethers where it's a lot of it is most of it's networking, but then we will have one panel discussion at this one. And that topic is going to be around these first round conditional licenses and these retail spaces that the state is identifying, potential problems with this, but also, you know, why people like it, why they don't, and just kind of have that conversation, because there's, like, again, I said, there's such a lack of information, and people just want answers. They just want to know, especially entrepreneurs who, you know, they may be borrowing money from their family just to pay the fee to apply for this thing, and they want to make sure this is right for me. This makes sense. Like, one of the guys I talked to the other day, he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna get this license, and then I'm gonna, you know, expand my store." And I was like, "You can't keep this store. Like, if you get that license, you got to move wherever they tell you to go." And his jaw just dropped. And like, he's not alone. There are so many of these people who just don't know what's going on, and it's not really their fault. They just need good information. So that's what we're focusing on in August.
You know, I tell people that, and this is just basic stuff, that you could put $500,000 towards a license in a store, the whole venture. You could put $500,000 towards it. And if things don't go right, you've lost $500,000. I mean, that you can't get it back. So you've got to be ready to belly up to the table and say that if I lose this, I'm good. You know, I won't die. With the knowledge that what you're doing is you're investing in the industry, and so that you'll make your money back. But there's also that part where you might not make it. It might not come back to you.
Yeah, it's a heck of a risk being among those first people to dip their toe in these waters here in New York. It's got to be scary and exciting, and I can't imagine.
So for us now, you're going to be our expert. So we're gonna come back to you in about a year to see what the temperature is. Can you, before we sign off, can you tell the audience how can they get in touch with Brad Racino? What would they have to do?
You can just Google New York Cannabis Insider, and it'll bring them to our website. We have a couple websites. We're trying to clean one of them up. There's one, if you just type in newyorkcannabisinsider.com, it'll bring you to something. But if you want to see all of our stories and what we're working on, that one is at newyorkupstate.com/cannabis-insider. It's a little confusing, but if you just Google, you'll find us. And what we do is we have a subscription, a paid subscription, but that is about 30-40% of our stories are for only subscribers. We try and keep the rest of it free for everybody, especially the news that is you know would want to know, even if you're not invested in this industry. It's about politics, it's about health, it's about whatever. We try and keep those free. And then the really insidery, wonky kind of things, like the meat and potatoes, that's what we have for subscribers. So we have a free newsletter, shows all of our stories every day. We're publishing basically 4 days a week, so they can subscribe to that for free. I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm all over the place. I'm everywhere.
All right. It sounds like you're going to have to cut down your sleeping from 12 to 3, maybe 12 to 2.
Yeah. Just up my coffee and Red Bull content, and make sure to get to the gym.
Get to the gym, he says. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you very much, Brad. I appreciate the time that you've spent, been so gracious with your time to let us know what's going on in New York with respect to the cannabis industry. And like I mentioned a few minutes ago, I do want to come back with you and see what's happening later on.
I would love that. And this has been fantastic. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay. Thank you for being with us.
If you'd like to hear more Cannabis Enlightened with Dr. Leroy, be sure to visit us online at cannabisenlightened.com and subscribe wherever you download your podcasts. Cannabis Enlightened is produced in San Diego, California, and presented by March and Ash at marchandash.com. On behalf of Dr. Leroy, I'm Chris Cantori, and thank you for listening.
Olas Media.